Hey everyone, Ryan here at etrailer. Today on our 2021 Ford Escape, we're going to be showing you how to install the Roadmaster diode wiring kit. Before we get into that though, let's take a minute, check everything out, and make sure this is going to be right for you. Before we jump right in, I figured it'd be useful to address one of the big questions that a lot of people wonder when it comes to flat towing, and that's, what parts am I going to need? There's going to be a total of 5 main components. You're going to have the base plate, which is going to provide us with an attachment point. That way we can hook our tow bar up to it. That's the second part. It's going to be the actual link that connects the front of your vehicle to the back of your coach. Third main part, you have safety cables, and those are just there in the event of an unlikely disconnect to keep everything paired together. And then you're going to have tow bar wiring. And what this will do is send the lighting functions from the back of your RV to the back of your Ford, keeping you safe and legal. And last but not least, the 5th main part will be a supplemental braking system. And what this will do is apply the brakes in your Escape whenever you hit the brakes in your motorhome, bringing you to a more predictable and safe stop. So this is a really good example on how the wiring is going to work. So we got our left turn signal going on our motorhome, and it's being sent to the back of our Escape. And the same is going to hold true for the right turn, your tail lights, as well as your brake lights. Now when it comes to picking out diode wiring or tow bar wiring in general, a diode kit like this is definitely what I recommend, usually 99% of the time. We have really good luck with them, and one of the best parts about it is once it's installed, you're really not going to see any changes in terms of the stuff you have to do to your vehicle. But one of the more beneficial things is when it comes to setting up. It's extremely straightforward. All you're going to have to do is plug a cable in, and in my opinion that beats other types of tow bar wiring, like magnetic lights for example. Those you'd have to set up every single time, route a wire up to the back of your motorhome, take it apart whenever you're done using it, so on and so forth. So since everything stays with the vehicle, it just makes life a lot easier. When you're ready to set up, you plug in the wire to the back of your coach and then to the front of your Escape. And that's really all there is to it. You don't have to bother with powering anything on or nothing along those lines. Now there's several different kits available, and what one you're going to need is going to be largely dependent on what tow bar you have. For example, today we have the Roadmaster Nighthawk tow bar, and that comes included with a cable as well as a 6-way round connector. And so the kit that we use, I like to call it the bare bones kit. Essentially it just comes with your wiring, the diodes, and some ins and outs to get it installed. And that's ideal because since your tow bar has those parts already, don't make sense to buy them twice. If your tow bar does not have, doesn't come included with this or the 6-way round connector, but it has channels in it, meaning these little drop down pieces sometimes are on the side. If your tow bar has channels, you want to use the kit that comes with the hybrid style cable, like this one where it's coiled on one end, straight on the other. That way you can run it through the channels and properly utilize them. And then there's another kit too that just has a straight cable that would work just fine as well. Really with the hybrid one, it's a little bit longer, so if your setup has a lot of distance between it, this might buy you a little more length there. And for those of you that have a tow bar that does not have those channels, you're going to want the kit that has a coiled cable. That way it'll sit up off the ground when you're going straight, but stretch out whenever you're making those turns. And those are by far the most popular kits. This one as well, you have the 7 to 6-way round. That's pretty much a standard on how flat tows get set up, at least how we do them here. For any other reason, let's say if you want a 4-way round type connector, which in my opinion, if you're going to go through the trouble setting it up, you might as well use a 6-way and get a couple more terminals that you can use for a charge line or something. But that's available as well, the 7 to 4 coiled. And then if you happen to have maybe an older motorhome that does not have a 7-way installed and you don't really feel like messing with that, there's a 4-way flat to 4-way flat kit available as well. I want to mention too, on the Escape, there is going to be an additional part you need to make everything work as you'd expect it to, and that's called a brake light relay. And so the way these Fords are set up, what were to happen without a brake light relay is the brake signal would override the turn signal. So to kind of paint that picture, let's say if you're at a stoplight making a left turn. So you're sitting there with your foot on the brake and your blinker going. Without that relay, what would happen is both the lights back here would just have the brake lights on, all right, because it'd override the turn signal. So you'd have your motorhome turning left with the brake light on the other side and brake lights back here. And you can see where that would confuse some people. It's not really the right way of doing things. And so when you go to add that brake light relay, it's going to correct that issue. So with the relay, if you're at a stop sign or whatever, making a turn, you'll have the blinker going on one side, on both the vehicle and the coach, and the brake light on the other side, which is definitely the right way of doing things. Aside from that, at the end of the day, if you're looking for a reliable wiring kit with a bunch of different varieties in terms of what you can put together, in terms of the cable that you need, this is one you really can't go wrong with. Like I said, we've done a ton of them here and have had a lot of luck with them. As far as the installation goes, it's really not too bad, more time consuming than anything, just having to route your wires from the front to the back and things like that. But stay focused, you should be all right, and hopefully we can help you out. So why don't we go ahead and get started on it now. To begin our installation, we're going to be underneath the hood, and you can take your wiring and we need to route it to the front of our vehicle. So I just dropped it right down through, essentially, where it's going to come out here. And we do have our front fascia removed, and that's because we're doing this the same time that we're doing our base plate, which is what I definitely recommend. Makes it a lot easier, but it can be done with everything put back together. But the wiring just runs kind of along through here. I drilled a little hole in the plastic there to push that through. And everything's just loose right now. We'll come back at the end and clean everything up, but it comes out over here to where our bracket on our base plate is. Grab the little rubber boot that goes on the back of the connector plug. We'll slide that over our wiring. And in case you're wondering, this red wire, this is for a battery charge line. I suggest doing this if you're going to be installing one, which I recommend. Do this at the same time that you're doing your diodes, because you already kind of be routing stuff in a similar fashion and already you know, dealing with the back of the connector. So saves you a little time. But as far as the diodes go, what you can do is take a pair of snips and just cut in between each wire, maybe about a 1/4 inch or so, and then separate the strands, usually pull them back a few inches. And then one thing that I like to do, just in case if we nicked a wire or something, is cut like maybe about a 1/2 inch off, kind of start fresh. And then on each end, you can strip the insulation back about that much. And give that wire a twist. Like that, and I'll do the same thing for these other ends here. If you look at the back of your connector plug, each terminal is going to be labeled, and they're kind of tricky to see, but the letters are there. This one's TM for taillight, so the brown wire gets plugged in it. Then you have GD for ground, so the white wire goes there. This one is LT for left turn, so the yellow plugs into that. And then this one's RT for right turn, so the green will go into there. And what you want to do, these set screws, you want to run them pretty much all the way out. Try not to pull them all the way because they're kind of a pain to get back in. They're easy to lose. But we'll run these out, and then you take the appropriate color wire. So we'll just start with our tail light signal and work our way down. That'll just plug into that terminal there. All right, kind of push down on it, and then take your Phillips screwdriver and snug it down. So I'm just going to work my way around here So we get them all plugged in. This is how the connector is going to look once you have all the wires hooked up for your diodes. And before we go any further, since I'm right here, I'm going to go ahead and get my charge line hooked up as well. Now that we're done in here, one thing that you can do, what I like to wait to the very end once you verify everything's working, is put some sealer in here all around the terminals, and that'll really help prevent corrosion from occurring. I like to wait to the end though, that way in case we have an issue up here for whatever reason, we don't have a big mess to work with. So time being, we'll put our dust boot back on, and then I'll just temporarily mount this up to our bracket. So what you can do now, take the other end of your harness here, and we're going to separate just the white wire. All right, and we're just going to peel it off of our harness completely. And we're going to run this all the way down until, you know, from where our wiring comes in the engine compartment, we're going to leave maybe about this much wire on the harness to work with. And wherever we make that cut, you want to hold on to the extra piece of wire here, because chances are really good we're going to be using it here a little bit later on. Got this separated in our white wire, cut to length, and this is going to be a ground. And so I'm going to attach it to this factory ground stud here. I did strip the insulation back on the wire just like we did down at the connector plug. Except this time you can take a ring terminal and crimp it on. And this is how all of our connections are going to be made, whether it be a ring terminal, a butt connector, spade terminal, what have you. Slide over the bare end of the wire and crimp it down. Now that'll stay connected to our wire. And as far as getting it on the stud, we can remove that with a 13mm. Take your ring terminal, put it through the stud. As far as the rest of your wiring goes, this is going to get routed towards the back of the vehicle up into the taillights. And so what I did is just took our wire, dropped it kind of straight down. That way it comes out of the bottom of the vehicle. When you're doing this, or routing any wiring for that matter, do your best to avoid any hot or moving parts, especially in those type of areas. And if you're going to be installing a supplemental braking system that requires you to tap into the diodes, like we are, for example, we have the Stay and Play Duo, and there's a couple others out there. Make sure to, you know, when you kind of tie this off, give yourself enough slack up here. That way you can make those connections if you need to. So. Just something to think about, make it easier on you if that's your situation. But with that drop down, we'll go ahead and continue moving on here. Before we go underneath the car, I just want to kind of prep some things and spend as little time under there as possible. So we'll get our taillights removed. If you open up your hatch, you're going to have this round little plastic cover here. You can just take a pick or a little screwdriver or something and pop that out. That will expose a Torx bit. Looks like you could use a flathead screwdriver too, but I have a T20. We'll get that removed. And then what I've done here is prepped our taillight. So with these taillights, you can't completely disconnect them. And so we are gonna have to kind of let it hang for a little bit. So I just put painter's tape all over this area, that way we don't scratch anything. The way to get these out though, you're gonna wiggle it a little, but primarily pull towards the side, all right? And if we look, these little pins, these alignment pins, that's what was holding it in place. That's why I pulled this way. You'll have this little grommet here. You kind of just peel down on it. And that will give us a little more working room here. But for the time being, what I'm going to do kind of carefully find a way to set this. But the reason I'm doing this is so we could take a pole wire. All right, so I just have a piece of tubing here. You can also use another piece of wire, metal coat hanger if you straighten it out. And I'm going to drop this through this opening. And it'll come out of the bottom in order to get them back up into the taillight pocket. You know, we'll take our wires, be able to tape them to this and then pull them right up where we need them to go. So this side's set up, kind of keep our taillight in place here so it's not hanging, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing over on the passenger side. Now underneath the front of our vehicle, you know, we dropped our wiring down, and here's where it come down. All right, and in our case, we do have this panel. And to make it a lot easier, there's a handful of just 10mm nuts kind of just scattered throughout on the edge you can remove. That way you can pull it down if you want. And I just followed these factory lines here. It's usually a pretty safe bet. Use some zip ties every now and again to keep it secure. And then it follows around this way, and then goes along the side of our fuel tank. Just continues along the side of our tank, and then I have it running up and over our subframe there. And then at this point, what I did was peel the green wire apart from the yellow and brown. All right, the yellow and brown runs this way, and what I've done on the end of that yellow and brown wire, if you remember that big piece of white wire that we saved, I taped the white wire to it and then taped all three to our fish wire that we dropped down. But that white wire, you know, runs backwards essentially over to here and meets up with the green wire that we separated from our harness. And this is going to get routed just along through here, following this harness over to here where it drops down, and I taped it to the fish wire over here. Back up top, we can get in behind our taillight, and before we pull our new wires up, we'll kind of prep all these. And so I tested the wires, and the purple one, that's going to control our stop and turn signal, and the yellow one, that's going to control our taillight signal. And so what we'll do is cut them about in half here, and then we'll strip back the end, and we'll take a blue connector, put that over the bare end of the wire and crimp it down. And we're going to do that for all of the ends here. So this end and those two ends. Got all the ends crimped on, and now you can take your diodes, and one side of the diode will have a single terminal. You want to take that and plug it into the wire that's actually going into the back of our tail light. So one gets plugged in there. One gets plugged in there, and then you just go color for color. All right, so the factory yellow plugs into the other end of the diode. Factory purple goes into that end. And now at this point, we can take our fish wire, our wiring up here, I cut it to length, and The new yellow wire, you can strip that back and crimp on another blue spade terminal. And the white and brown wire, what you can do is actually twist these together. Try to get them nice and tight. And on this end, you're going to take the yellow connector that they give you and crimp this on. And that's what that white wire is for. Essentially, it's a jumper wire for our taillight signal. You know, we got it running over there to the passenger side. We can get these plugged in now. Since the factory purple wire controls our stop and turn, we'll take our new yellow wire, plug it into that diode. And since the factory yellow controls our taillight signal, we'll take our new brown and white wire and plug it in there. With everything hooked up over here, we can kind of just push everything back into place, and you don't have a ton of room to work. You know, it's just kind of the way it is. What I did though, I stuck our two diodes together. We'll just carefully kind of tuck everything in. Make sure we don't pinch any wires or anything along those lines. And simply just reinstall our tail light the opposite way that we removed it. With the driver's side complete, moved over here to the passenger side and did the same exact thing. Even the factory wire colors are going to be the same. So the factory yellow is the taillight signal, so we put the new white wire to that diode. And the factory purple is for stop and turn, so we put the new green wire into that diode. So once all these are hooked up, you know, I'll stick these together and kind of get everything sorted again and get the light put back in place. With everything hooked up now, it's a good idea to test the wiring to make sure that it's working properly. So I just plugged into a test box. This is just simulating an RV essentially to check all of our signals. You can use your motorhome, but keep in mind if your motorhome happens to have any issues that could mislead you into thinking it's something you did on the vehicle side. But with that in mind, we'll go ahead and check everything out. We'll power up our taillights. We'll try our left turn signal, our right turn signal, and our brake lights. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Roadmaster diode wiring kit on our 2021 Ford Escape.